Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to my complete Iansan guide. Iansan is the newest 4-star Electro support released in version 5.5, and she is genuinely a really strong buffer. In today's video, we're going to cover everything you need to know about Iansan regarding how to play and build her efficiently. We're going to cover best artifacts, weapons, teams, constellations, and much more, all in one complete and detailed guide. Before we begin, I do want you guys to know that I do stream both sites on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested, and do excuse the abnormal delay on this video as a few things came up, but we're back now, and hopefully I'll be early for Escoffier and Aoife. Alright, so starting things off, let's talk about what Iansan actually does. Firstly, Iansan's elemental skill is very straightforward. After she uses it, she will do a dash forward, dealing electro damage, and gaining 54 Night Soul points, which is her Night Soul point limit, immediately entering the Night Soul blessing state. Afterwards, if she does a normal attack within 5 seconds, this will trigger her special Night Soul charge attack, effectively a stomp, which is very useful to do as it will enable her first passive. Before we get into what this passive actually does though, we need to talk about the main part of her kit, which is her elemental burst. Iansan's elemental burst will first deal AoE electro damage, as well as giving her 15 Night Soul points and immediately entering the Night Soul blessing state. On top of just that, crucially, Iansan creates something called the kinetic energy scale, which will follow the active character and boost their attack significantly. Now, the way this attack buff works depends based on how many Night Soul points your Iansan has. If your Iansan has 42 Night Soul points or higher, it will buff your active character based on Iansan's attack with a max attack bonus of 690 at talent level 10 or 810 at talent level 13, which you can get at Constellation 5. Now, if however Iansan's Night Soul points are below 42, then the buff will be based on a mix of her Night Soul points and her attack, being a conversion of 0.5% of her attack per Night Soul point. Now, the way this attack buff works is that it scales based on movement. The kinetic energy scale is going to follow your active character, and it will log the distance that said character, excluding Iansan, has moved. Afterwards, it will restore Night Soul points to Iansan every second based on the distance that you moved in the previous second. In practice, what this will mean is that Iansan will be able to cap out her buff very easily alongside characters that are very mobile, that move inside of the rotation, like notably new DPSs from Natlan, who not only will synergize with her passive talent that we'll get into, but that also generally move around a lot. Now, as we'll see in the team comp section later, there are also some other characters that aren't from Natlan but move around a ton throughout their general gameplay loop, like notably someone who plunge attacks or dashes around. Now, with that said, even if she doesn't have 42 Night Soul points, it doesn't get the high attack percent scaling for her buff. You can still potentially even cap out the attack buff if you have enough attack, as you will still buff your character based on a mixture of your Night Soul points and attack, meaning that if you build enough attack on your Iansan, even if you don't have 42 Night Soul points, you can still be able to give your team a sizable attack increase. In order to maximize Iansan's attack buff, she will need to have 2,556 attack at talent level 10 or 3,000 at talent level 13. Keep in mind though that having more attack is nice, especially for teams where you might not be moving around as much and you might not have full uptime on her highest attack buff. And so in practice, the more attack you have, the better, but keep in mind that in the teams where you're playing Iansan with a Natlan character or someone who moves around a lot, the main thing you should be looking for is to cap your attack bonus, which shouldn't be too hard in practice, as this buff is based on Iansan's total attack, factoring in external buffs such as even Noblesse Oblige, Pyro Resonance, or any other attack buff your team may give you. Outside of that, other properties you should know are that Iansan's buff is actually snapshotable, so if you're running characters whose abilities snapshot, meaning that once they use it, it'll factor in their stats at the moment and keep it for the entire duration of the ability, even if a buff that they had at the start expires, like Shangling's Pyronado or Fischl's Oz, well, they can benefit greatly from Iansan's buff. Keep in mind that with Iansan's elemental burst active, her Night Soul blessing state won't end when she swaps. On the contrary, however, her Night Soul blessing state outside of her burst, meaning just after using her skill, will expire if you swap out of her, so you generally do not want to use your skill and then swap out without using your elemental burst. Now, for Iansan's passives, here's what you need to know. Firstly, after Iansan's stomp attack, which is technically her charge attack in the Night Soul state, but in practice, you will just get it after using your skill and inputting a normal attack, Iansan will gain 20% attack for herself. This is a welcomed bonus, and on top of that, she will also gain more Night Soul point restoration through her kinetic energy scale, just at a baseline with a further increase whenever your active party member consumes or restores Night Soul points. This means that Iansan will have more synergy with characters from Natlan, helping her stack up her Night Soul points more easily. For Iansan's second passive, she actually has some healing, which is appreciated. Whenever a Night Soul burst is triggered, she will heal the active character up to once every 2.8 seconds for 60% of her attack whenever she restores a Night Soul point. In practice, because this healing only happens every 2.8 seconds and it isn't the highest attack scaling ratio and it's also single target, this is mostly just an extra form of bonus healing, another form of defensive utility that is very much appreciated underrated, but it really isn't the biggest healing. It's not enough to make Iansan, for example, work as a solo healer with Farina, and it's mostly just bonus healing that can be enough either alongside another healer or on her own if you don't need the most healing and can dodge efficiently. It is nice that Iansan's a character who has healing. It's a really nice bonus, but again, as you can see through the numbers I'll put on screen, it really is nothing huge. It's single target. It's a nice little bonus, but it really is very small healing when compared to other good healers or even someone like Bennett when you consider the fact that this healing only happens once every 2.8 seconds, which is quite slow. Also, if you're wondering, you can keep track of roughly how many Night Soul points your Iansan has, as you can see her bar under her when you are on another character. Oh, and I also wanted to add that inside of Iansan's skill, she will run around rapidly and consume Night Soul points if you stay on her, which shouldn't be done in combat unless you want to consume Night Soul points, like in a weird case for Mawika, but generally, that's not something you should be doing, and is mostly just worth noting for exploration to run around faster. Lastly, for Iansan's talent priority, you really want to maximize your burst. This will increase the size of your attack buff, which is crucial to making Iansan as efficient of a buffer as possible. Outside of that, you can ignore your other talents. Unless you just want to increase her personal damage a bit, then her skill is fine to level, but really not needed. Her burst is what you want to maximize, and the rest you don't have to worry about. Leveling up your Iansan is recommended as well to give her as much attack as you can. Next up, to talk about Iansan's playstyle and give you guys my initial thoughts on her. Firstly, her gameplay is very straightforward. Generally in a rotation, all you want to do on your Iansan is use your elemental skill, then do a normal attack, which will trigger your passive, and then use your burst. So skill, normal attack, and then burst, and then you can swap out of your Iansan. Do note that at C2 onwards, you no longer need to do a normal attack to trigger your passive, so you can just use skill and burst, which can make your rotation faster. Using your normal attack can still be beneficial though, if you need it for electro application. Do note that in some teams, notably with Xxalanchangxx, you can use Iansan's burst at the start of your rotation, then swap and use your skill and normal attack, but this will hurt your buff's uptime, so it's a bit more niche, but worth pointing out. Generally though, you just use your skill, normal attack, and then burst, or just skill and burst at C2. Outside of that, I think Iansan is an excellent 4-star, a new, really strong buffer that I think is a great addition to the game and to many different teams. She's a character who is good at C0, so definitely feel free to use her, but is also one who gets a lot better with Constellations because, as we'll see shortly, she is someone who has really good Constellations, like notably her C2, C6, and even C5. Iansan in general, but especially with Constellations, can be a part of a lot of meta teams, even with the best DPSs in the game, provided they scale with attack and move around a lot and can synergize with Iansan's kit, notably someone like Mawika or basically anyone from that land who can utilize Iansan efficiently. Iansan is a character who has a lot of different buffs that she can give you, notably damage bonus through the scroll set, a ton of attack through her burst, with this scaling on your talent level, and then also having more buffs with her Constellations, notably 30% attack at C2 and 25% damage bonus at C6, provided you move around enough to get this bonus. Iansan also gives you a little bit of healing, which really isn't the most as we saw, but it's a nice bonus that is appreciated. Iansan's also an electro character who doesn't apply the most electro, which can actually be beneficial, as we'll see when we talk about Iansan in a Kanichi team or even with Mawika, where not applying the most electro actually allows you to keep triggering other reactions that you're looking for in a non-electro focused team. Iansan is also the second really big attack buffer we get outside of Bennett, and it is really nice to have another character like that, as so many teams really want Bennett, that now having an alternative or someone you can use alongside Bennett is actually very much appreciated. While Iansan isn't a character that comes out and replaces Bennett, she's someone who can be used either alongside of him or as an alternative in another team, as someone fulfilling a very similar role but having key differences. Obviously her buffs are different, and how much she buffs you will depend on her constellation level, and synergizing more with characters that move around a lot, so Natland DPSs, plunge attackers, or characters that just move around as they do damage, while also being a great wielder of the scroll set, with her healing not being nearly as high as someone like Bennett's, and it's mostly just a nice form of secondary healing. And so as we will end up seeing in the team section later, a lot of teams end up running both Iansan and Bennett, or will end up running one of the two, and then you can have the other one that you can use in your other team, with Iansan synergizing more with certain characters, and Bennett being a pyro character that can help give you the resonance, having more healing, and also having a buff that doesn't depend on movement, but instead confines you into a circle. So they are distinct characters, but two really strong attack buffers that I think can complement each other, or that can be used in different teams, which I think is great. All right, now with all that out of the way, let's get into how to actually build your Iansan, starting with her best artifact sets. For Iansan, there really is one main option you should go for in the majority of teams, and this is going to be the Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City. It is no secret by now that this set is pretty broken, and it's just the generic Natland support set that really gives you so much value. Now, the 2-piece of this set is actually very underrated, and it will give your Iansan a lot of energy, which can can be very beneficial to help get her burst back on cooldown. Outside of that, the 4-piece effect will give your team a 40% elemental damage bonus to any element involved in a reaction that you're triggering, which can be a huge damage buff to almost any DPS you're running Veressa with, provided they aren't a Nemo or Geo. Keep in mind that this set will buff multiple elements at the same time, meaning that you will buff both Electro and whatever other element you are reacting with, provided you trigger said reaction on Iansan. In practice, this set will therefore give you 40% elemental damage bonus to potentially multiple different elements, while also giving you energy, and it's really just the go-to set for Iansan. There generally won't be much thinking here. Now, the exceptions to this are if you either already have someone else on the scroll set in your team, and obviously 2 people running the set won't stack the buff, so it won't work, or if you're running Veressa alongside elements that she can't buff, like a Nemo or Geo, because she can't trigger, swirl, or crystallize herself, and there isn't another damage dealer in that team, like maybe Farina, that she could buff, then you can consider another artifact set, namely the Noblesse Oblige set, which will be her second go-to support set if scroll doesn't work for your team. This artifact set will give your entire party 20% attack after Iansan uses her burst, which basically will just amplify her attack buff, being a solid alternative. Outside of that, you technically can go for 2-piece just for stats, but this really isn't recommended unless your team already has both scroll and Noblesse Oblige. And so overall, artifact set wise, it's very straightforward. There's basically just 2 options, and for most teams, you are just putting your Iansan on the scroll set and moving on. Next up, for the stats you're looking for on Iansan, here it is going to be very straightforward. There are effectively only 2 or sometimes 3 stats that you're looking for on Iansan. You are looking for, firstly, enough energy recharge to use your burst every rotation as often as possible. Outside of that, you want to be looking for as much attack as you can get, at least enough to cap out your buff when you're at 42 Night Soul points or higher, but maybe even more depending on the team. Lastly, crit rate can be useful if you are running the Favonius Lance to trigger its effect reliably. So firstly, for the energy recharge amounts you're looking for, here it will vary very highly based on the team that you're running, your weapon, and also whether or not you have Iansan's first constellation, which helps her restore energy greatly. In practice, Iansan can need either a very low amount or a very high amount of energy recharge, depending on these factors. And so while I've done a lot of personal testing with Iansan in various teams, and I recommend you guys find what works for you, I'm going to put some numbers on screen now that I got from Kaching Main, so a big thanks to them, as they do have a lot of helpful resources. And here you guys can see general rough ranges of what you should be looking for based on whether she's Constellation 0 or has her C1, and whether she's with another Electro character or not. Her rotation length will also vary here, and you may need less energy recharge if you have more characters on Favonius weapons in your team. And also keep in mind that the scroll set helps with energy greatly, and the 2-piece is assumed in these rough ranges. What I will say in practice though, to make this simple, is if you have Iansan's first constellation, any Favonius Lance, in a lot of teams she'll already have enough energy recharge just from the weapon and maybe 1 or 2 substats. Without either of these, her energy recharge requirements will go up, with it potentially being very high at C0 if she's the only Electro character in your team, which will be the case in a few of her meta teams because she's so universal. Now, outside of energy recharge, Iansan also wants attack. Effectively, it's the more the merrier, but how much attack you want is something I covered a bit earlier in the video, where to maximize your buff at 42 Night Soul points, Iansan will want 2,556 attack at talent level 10, or exactly 3,000 at talent level 13 to maximize her buff. As a general rule though, I would aim for as much attack as you can get. 3,000 is a nice number of effective attack factoring in all your buffs, but if you are consistently maximizing your Night Soul point limit, you're running Iansan with someone who moves a lot, generally a Natlan DPS or someone else who's just dashing around, then just having enough attack to cap out your buff is enough, but having more attack will help if your Iansan's Night Soul points drop under 42. The more attack you have, the bigger the buff will be, getting you closer and closer to the cap based on how many Night Soul points you have under 42, with it always being maxed out at 42 or higher. Generally speaking though, build enough energy recharge to use your burst on cooldown, and then just stack attack percent on every single piece wherever you can get it. So in practice, what this looks like is attack and ER on all of your substats, with crit rate also being nice if you have a Favonius circlet. For your main stats, you are looking for either attack percent or energy recharge on your sands, attack percent on your goblet, and generally attack percent on your circlet as well. Once again, if you are running Favonius Lance and don't have enough crit rate, then a crit rate circlet can be viable as well to trigger its effect reliably. Overall though, while I said a lot of numbers and tried to give as much information as possible in this section, building her is easy. You just want enough ER and then as much attack as you can get, with crit rate being nice if you're running Favonius as well. While building Iansan for her personal damage is technically viable, it isn't as recommended as maximizing her buff, so I recommend focusing on her attack. Alright, now next up, let's talk about the weapons you want on Iansan and which ones you should be using. Firstly, it's important to say that Iansan basically has 3 types of weapons that are good for her. The weapons you're looking for either will give you a lot lot of attack, a lot of energy recharge, a mix of the two, or have a strong supportive effect. As far as polearms go, there aren't that many supportive ones, but the best one overall, a great supportive choice for many different teams, is going to be the Favonius Lance. This is because the Favonius Lance has a high base attack for a 4-star weapon, while also having energy recharge on the stat line. Outside of that, it is a weapon that will generate energy for your entire team when you do crit on your Iansan. This will benefit her, allowing her to need a lot less energy, while also helping her team that may otherwise be very energy hungry. In teams that build energy recharge or that can use the energy, which tends to be a lot of teams, being able to build less energy recharge and instead reinvest it in offensive stats like crit or attack percent effectively will transform this energy that this weapon generates for you into more damage, making it a really good supportive choice overall and the most recommended option in a lot of teams. Just be sure to build enough crit rate to trigger this effect through your substats or maybe a crit circlet. Now, outside of just Favonius Lance though, there are some weapons that can give your Iansan more personal stats, which can be beneficial if you either don't have this weapon or if your team doesn't need the bonus energy. Firstly, any 5-star stat stick that gives you either attack or energy recharge can be nice. This means Calamity Queller, Vortex Vanquisher, Engulfing Lightning, or Skyward Spine can all be solid options for your Iansan. Outside of that, 4-star stat sticks that give you these stats as well are also solid. Missive Wind Spear, Wavebreaker Fin, Prospector's Drill, Lithic Spear, or even the new event weapon, the Torch, is one that gives your Iansan a lot of stats, a high base attack, energy recharge, and more attack on the effect, which is a weapon that seems tailor-made for her and a solid free-to-play choice if you did the recent event. If you are a newer account or maybe didn't do the event and really don't have any polearms, then you can't always craft something like Prototype Star Glitter, but it obviously won't be as good. Outside of that, if you are playing Iansan in a Dendro team, notably with someone like Kanich, then another supportive option you can choose is Moonpiercer. While this weapon won't give your Iansan as good stats as the alternatives, it will drop a leaf when you trigger a Dendro reaction that will give 32% attack at R5 to whoever picks it up. This will effectively give her another buff when played in certain teams, notably with Kanich, who can make use of this buff quite nicely. Generally speaking though, Iansan does have quite a few different weapon options that she can choose from, with any of the 5-star stat sticks being great, 4-star stat sticks being solid alternatives as well, with the Favonius Lance being your general go-to option that I recommend the most for most players in most teams, as the stats help both your Iansan hit her energy recharge requirements, get a solid amount of base attack as well, while also giving a lot of energy to your team, provided you have a bit of crit rate. Alright, now next up, let's talk about Iansan's Constellations and how good they are. Firstly, Iansan C1 will help her with energy, giving her 15 energy up to once every 18 seconds, so basically just more energy in a rotation, which will help her build even less energy recharge. This is just a pretty convenient constellation, with its exact value varying based on your team and energy recharge requirements. Next up, for Iansan's second constellation, this is going to be her first big one and her first extra buff. In fact, Iansan C2 will trigger her first passive talent when she uses her burst, meaning that you no longer have to do an attack on Iansan after your skill. With that in mind, you can still do it if you need more electro application, but you no longer have to, on top of also and especially increasing your active character's attack by 30% while your Iansan is off field. This is effectively just another 30% attack buff to your active character, which is honestly really good. Next up, Iansan C3 and 5 increase their talent levels, with C3 being mostly useless, but C5 being really nice for more burst levels and therefore a higher attack buff cap, making it definitely a nice constellation. For Iansan C4, this is one that is quite interesting, doing two things to help with Iansan's Night Soul point generation. Firstly, while Iansan's burst is active, once another character uses their burst, Iansan will restore 8 Night Soul points up to once per rotation. On top of just that, if Iansan's Night Soul point restoration were to overflow, well, Iansan will gain 50% of the overflow the next time she restores Night Soul points, meaning that you will waste less Night Soul points and get more value overall. In practice, this constellation helps just get more Night Soul points consistently for teams that may struggle with it. It can help offset the standing still you may be doing on certain supports when you swap into them and use their bursts after Iansan, and even help with some DPSs that are barely Night Soul point negative for her, where having these extra Night Soul points and the ability to get some overflow bonus is very much appreciated. The exact strength of this constellation will vary from team to team, but overall it just helps with Night Soul point generation, which is appreciated. Lastly, for Iansan C6, this is another huge one that will first increase your burst duration by 3 seconds, making it go from 12 to 15. This is nice in teams that have longer rotations, or if you want to use Iansan before other supports like Bennett, helping them both get more uptime. Additionally, when Iansan triggers Night Soul point restoration, if there's any overflow, she will increase your active character's damage dealt by 25% for 3 seconds. This is really big because it just adds another 25% damage bonus buff to her kit, which makes her an even stronger buffer. With that in mind, this will only trigger if there is any Night Soul point overflow overflow. So this is a constellation that will only really work if you are moving around enough, generating enough night soul points, and are using Iansan with a character that synergizes with her in particular, meaning characters who are either from Natlan or who move around a lot through their abilities or by plunging. Overall, Iansan's someone who has really good constellations, but is also an excellent support at C0. With that in mind, Iansan is someone who gets better and becomes even more meta and even stronger and part of the strongest teams in the game with her constellations as well. Again, I want to emphasize that if you have her C0, she's still great, but basically all of her constellations except her third one are nice, with C2 and C6 in particular giving you more buffs that are very much appreciated, and the talent levels from C5 are nice as well. Alright, now with all that out of the way, let's talk about Iansan's best teams and synergies. Firstly, as we saw earlier, I want to reiterate that Iansan is just a very strong attack buffer who will synergize well with any character that can move rapidly, or characters that are from Natlan, or even those who will just value the buffs that she gives you overall. While you will mainly only maximize her buff with characters that are constantly moving, so DPSs from Natlan or others that are very agile and that move a lot in their rotation, even outside of that, Iansan can be a somewhat overlooked and still solid buffer in teams where you may not even be able to maximize her attack buff, especially if you have her constellations, as she will give you buffs through her C2, C6, and then also at a baseline from her scroll set, as well as some attack from her burst and some healing. Outside of that, in a lot of teams, you will either run her alongside or instead of Bennett, depending on the situation. If you want to free yourself from having to stay within a circle, want to run Bennett on your second half, or want to run both Iansan and Bennett together, as will be the case in a few teams we're about to see, where it's just a lot of stats, then Iansan can be great there as well. Now with that said, let's start by talking about what DPS characters Iansan can actually get a lot of value with. Firstly, it should be no surprise to anyone that any of the attack scaling Natlan DPSs can make great use of Iansan, who's oftentimes featured in their best and most meta team comp. First of all, for Mawika, Iansan can definitely be used in a Mawika team as an incredible option. With constellations, Iansan can actually be a part of Mawika's best team, so that's great. Another character providing you with a ton of buffs that Mawika will really make use of, as she's constantly spinning around on her bike. While the exact slots in a Mawika team can vary based on what you have, Iansan's a great choice here and a part of her new premium team. Outside of that, Iansan's also great with Veressa, as I went over in my last video, being a second Electro character for Veressa, enabling the Electro Resonance, and also giving her a huge amount of buffs that she benefits greatly from. This is the case in almost any Veressa team where Iansan is an almost essential staple. Iansan can also be played alongside Chaska, who can move around freely as she's loading up shots in the air on her giant gun. Being an Electro character that can run, scroll, and trigger reactions with any other elements you're running in the team like Pyro, Hydro, or Cryo is really nice and will help amplify Chaska's damage, being a very appreciated support for her. Keep in mind that Chaska's teams aren't fixed though, so outside of just Iansan, you can kind of play any good Chaska teammate that you have available, like Sitlali, Mawika, or almost any Electro, Pyro, Hydro, or Cryo character can work as well. Outside of that, Kanich can also use Iansan surprisingly well, and she can make it in Kanich's new best teams. This is because as a Dendro character, it's quite difficult to have a strong scroll-wielding support from Natlan. It is difficult for an off-field Pyro to run it efficiently with Kanich because when you reapply the burning aura, the scroll set won't re-trigger, making its uptime a lot worse. Outside of that, there aren't any other Dendro supports from Natlan, and so having a new Electro buffer that can wield the scroll set and who doesn't apply a lot of Electro is actually a lifesaver for Kanich. While Auroron is a great support for many teams, for Kanich, he just applies way too much Electro, and so Iansan being a strong buffer but also someone who applies just a little bit of Electro is a really big deal for Kanich. Because her abilities don't constantly apply Electro from off-field, what she can do is just trigger a quicken reaction with Kanich, buff him through the scroll set, and then also give him huge attack buffs which he can easily maximize as he spins around enemies with his grappling hook, is excellent as he can still keep the burning aura on enemies without fear of losing it and benefiting from all the buffs that Iansan will give him. Now do keep in mind that once again there's a lot of different viable and really strong Kanich teams, and if you have Iansan available, she's highly recommended. Keep in mind that you want a Deepwood user in a Kanich team, and in one like this with both Bennett and Mawika, Mawika will be the one running Deepwood, as crazy as that sounds. Outside of that though, any off-field Pyro or even Dendro can work here. You just need some form of burning application to make sure Kanich can benefit from fighting burning enemies. In these teams, Iansan can either be a Bennett replacement or someone ran alongside Bennett for just more buffs, which is really nice. Also, something I want to point out is that if you don't have a good form of off-field Pyro, like for example this team right here, because you want to make sure enemies are still burning, what you want to make sure to do is to use your Iansan's abilities before going into your Bennett, triggering your quicken, and then going to Bennett, applying that Pyro, maintaining a burning aura on enemies for the entirety of the time you spend on Kanich. Outside of just Natlan DPSs though, Iansan also synergizes with other DPS characters that move a lot in combat. Firstly, Clorind is one where Iansan can be another solid option in her teams. I would say that I would especially use her in Chevreuse overload teams, where having another Electro support is very much appreciated. In Quicken teams, however, while Iansan is viable, losing out on more off-field Electro damage with a second carry like Fischl, or for example, an Anemo buffer, wouldn't be as personally recommended. With that said, in a Clorind overload team, Iansan works quite nicely to buff your Clorind. Now keep in mind that Clorind will not be the most reliable at keeping Iansan's buff fully stacked, at least without Constellations. With that said, you're usually just barely Niceful point negative and can usually still have enough of a buff to make Iansan a good option, with this varying based on your rotation and how you're playing. Keep in mind the synergy gets even better at C4, and just in general, Iansan is another good choice in a Clorind team. I do want to add that in practice, I found that my Clorind can actually manage to maintain good enough stacks with my C0 Iansan, provided I'm moving around as much as I can and being optimal in my rotation. So I do think the synergy here exists and the buff is good enough. It may become easier and more consistent at C4, but even just at a baseline, provided you're moving around enough on your characters and with your Clorind, Iansan should definitely work here, either maxing out your buff or even just being close to it, which is still a great buff if you have enough attack. Outside of that, you can also run Iansan alongside a plunge DPS, basically anyone who's plunging, and she'll work great. She can be another option in a Gaming team, or even the last slot in a Xiao team, as one that is usually Xiao, Faruzan, Shan Yun, and then a flex between Farina or Bennett. Well, now you have a third choice, which is Iansan. While she can't run the scroll set here because Iansan can't trigger a swirl herself and will lose some value, she still provides you with a sizable buff that makes her another choice in this team. Nothing game breaking, not really an upgrade, more of a side grade that you can use if, for example, your Farina and Bennett are in the other team or you don't have them available. So just another option, which is nice, and she definitely works with plungers who will move around a lot, jumping up and down, and can maintain her Niceful points. Iansan is also a viable option with Arlecchino, who will move when she does her charge attack and who you can dash around with in between your normal attacks. And overall, Iansan being able to run the scroll set and give you some attack is appreciated with Arlecchino. While Iansan isn't going to be someone who replaces Bennett here, you can very easily use her alongside of him, or once again, if you don't have Bennett available or don't want to use him, well, now at least you have another option you can use, which will help give you a lot of attack. With that said though, she's generally just another good support you can run here as another strong buffer in an Arlecchino team, even though you won't be moving the most. Outside of that, other generic attack scalers, ideally those who move a bit, but even just attack scalers in general, can make use of Iansan. While obviously she'll give you a bigger buff the more you move, Iansan, provided she can run the scroll set in the team that you're putting her in, will already give you a lot of buffs as long as she has a good amount of attack and you can get at least a decent amount of Niceful points, giving you attack from her burst, a bit of healing, and a big damage bonus from the scroll set, while also getting better with Constellations, like notably having a free attack buff at C2, can help make Iansan a more flexible buffer for more DPS characters than you might think. Being viable with most attack scaling carries, having better synergy the more they move. It is important to point out on this point that because Iansan doesn't apply too much Electro and none at all when she's off field, you can use her in teams where you don't really need Electro, just to trigger a reaction, proc your scroll set, give buffs, a bit of healing, and then swap out. And so Iansan does have a lot of flexibility. Her buff is also snapshotable, and as I said, she can work in more teams than you would think as just a solid option. Once again, she works the best with characters that move around a lot, notably characters from Natlan, but even just any generic DPS that will scale on attack and that moves a lot as they're fighting. And so yeah, overall, Iansan's a character that I genuinely have been enjoying quite a bit. I think she surpassed my expectations. Now, obviously, as the first character from Natlan that we saw, I do wish she was a 5-star, but as a 4-star support, I'm very happy with her. We finally got another attack buffer other than Bennett and technically Sarah, but an attack buffer that can work in so many teams, provided your character can move around a lot, is honestly very nice and appreciated. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, do excuse the delay on this guide, but I hope it was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything you want to add, it will be in a pinned comment, so be sure to check that. And with all that being said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.